We've created a wine compass in O'Brien's to categorise the different styles of wine so that you can find your own style. Fortified wines are one of the most fascinating wine styles. What does fortified mean? It means that the wines are made initially in the same way as a table wine. So the grapes arrive at the winery and the fermentation process starts after pressing. But at a certain stage during the fermentation, the wines are fortified by the addition of a neutral grape spirit. That tends to do two things. Fortification stops the alcoholic fermentation. It changes the final alcohol in the final wine, so typically fortified wines would have more alcohol than a typical table wine. And that alcohol also determines the rightness and the sweetness of the wine, because depending on what stage the alcohol is added, there may be more sugar left in the wine or less. The style is dependent on the grape variety, the country, the region and the traditions. So we're going to look at three styles of fortified wine. The first is the bone dry white. This is exactly the style of this wine. It's white, it's dry and it's very, very crisp. This is a Montilla from Spain, so a very similar style to sherry, Fino sherry. And you have two things here. You have the yeasty notes on the nose, and then you have a very powerful, savoury, saline note on the nose. It's intense, it's concentrated. This Montilla would be the same level of alcohol as a sherry. It's 15%, so quite rich and quite strong, but would be a very good style of food wine. So this type of wine would be fantastic with roasted almonds, with nibbles, sharing platters as an aperitif at the start of a meal, and typically would be served chilled. Absolutely delicious. It's dry, it's clean, there's power in the palate, there's complexity on the palate, there's texture on the palate, water at one side of texture, cream at the other. So this is definitely going towards the creamy side in terms of texture. A really interesting wine style. Number two is a sweet complex amber. And this is a Rive Salt from the Languedoc region in France, a Vin Doux Naturel. And this is 16% alcohol, so again a bit richer. You can see this beautiful amber colour because this wine has a decent amount of age in bottle and cellars before it's actually released. Raisins, toffee, caramel, everything ripe and concentrated. It almost smells like Christmas. You know from those aromas that this wine is going to have a bit of sweetness on the palate. Raisins and toffee and caramel come through to the palate, but there's a lovely acidity. It's like salivation at the sides of the tongue, indicating that acidity, keeping everything fresh. A really traditional style of wine, absolutely delicious and something a bit different. This would be absolutely fantastic with a hard cheese. You don't need to think of sweet wines or wines with residual sugar just to go with sweet food. Yes, this would be fantastic with a delicious piece of Madeira cake or something, but the other side is that it would be fantastic with hard cheese. We're moving on now to perhaps one of, if not the most famous fortified wines in the world, and this is a port. This is a late bottled vintage port, and we in this category of our compass call this a sweet, powerful red. There's a residual sugar. This is 20% alcohol. So this is the way that port is made. Typically port would be 19.5 or 20% alcohol. Powerful red berries on the nose, black currants, brambles, and that follows through to the palate. And you can start to detect the alcohol with a slight alcohol burn at the back of the palate. It's not unpleasant because the wine is beautifully balanced. The tannins, that grip on the teeth, the ripe fruit, the sweetness in the wine and the touch of alcohol, and then there's a refreshing acidity on the sides of the tongue. So everything is beautifully balanced. A fascinating range of wines within Fortified. There's many more you could consider. You could think about Malaga from Spain, you think about Madeira from Portugal, you could think about Marsala from Sicily. It's an area that's really, really worth investigating. There's sips of wine, small glasses, occasionally, is an absolute treat.